America's $13 billion aircraft carrier is on fire. That's the headline. That's the image your brain grabs. And within minutes, your feed turns it into a movie. It got hit. It's sinking. It's a secret attack. The war just changed. But if you actually want the real story, here it is in plain English. This wasn't a battlefield strike. This was a shipboard fire, reported to have started in the carrier's laundry area, contained and put out, with 2 sailors injured and treated, and the ship remaining operational. And that difference matters, because when people confuse accident on board with combat damage, they don't just get one story wrong, they build an entire worldview on the wrong foundation. So in this video, I'm going to do 3 things: fast, clear, no fluff. First, what actually happened, based on credible reporting and official confirmation. Second, why a fire on a supercarrier is serious even when it's not combat, and why it's also not automatically the end. Third, the simple framework you can use every time you see a viral military headline, so you don't get played by the loudest caption. And I'll give you the mini payoff right now so you're not waiting for it. The scariest part of modern war headlines isn't what happened. It's how fast people decide what happened. Because in a crisis, the first story is usually a weapon, not always a weapon fired by a government. Sometimes it's just a weapon fired by the algorithm. All right, let's ground this. The reports that matter say a fire broke out aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's newest Ford-class aircraft carrier, operating in the Red Sea. Multiple outlets reported the fire was not related to combat, and that 2 sailors were injured, but in stable condition. The fire was contained and extinguished, and officials said the ship remained operational. USNI News. Now notice what I did not say. I did not say it was hit by a missile. I did not say it was disabled. I did not say it was on the verge of sinking, because that's where the internet goes immediately, and that's where people get manipulated. So here's your first reality check, and it's the most important one. An aircraft carrier being on fire can mean anything from a localized onboard incident that's quickly controlled to a catastrophic emergency. Those are not the same story. And what we have here, based on the reporting that's actually worth trusting, fits the first category: contained, extinguished, injuries treated, operations continuing. USNI News. Now let's talk about why this became such a massive headline anyway. Because the phrase $13 billion carrier triggers a very specific emotional reaction. It's not just a ship, it's a symbol of national power. It's a floating city with nuclear reactors, air wings, thousands of sailors, and enough capability to make whole regions rethink their plans. So when people hear carrier fire, their brain doesn't picture laundry room. It pictures war. And that's why misinformation loves moments like this, because the audience is already primed to believe the most dramatic explanation. In fact, we've seen this pattern repeatedly. Viral clips claiming U.S. carriers were burning after missile strikes have circulated before, and multiple fact checks have debunked those clips as old or manipulated. PolitiFact. So if you saw a post saying Iran hit the carrier, here's the adult posture: don't argue, don't panic, don't share. Ask one simple question: what are the credible outlets saying, and do they agree on the mechanism? Because carrier on fire plus war in the region is exactly the kind of combo that gets people to connect dots that aren't actually connected. Now, that's the what happened. Let's get into the what it means, because that's where the real value is. First, why is a shipboard fire a big deal, even if it's not combat? Because a carrier is a dense, complex machine with thousands of moving parts and thousands of people living on it. It's fuel, it's electrical systems, it's hydraulic systems, it's heat, it's maintenance, it's cooking, it's laundry, it's aviation operations, it's constant motion, and fire is the universal enemy at sea. Not because sailors don't know how to fight it, because at sea, you can't step outside and call the fire department. You are the fire department. So even a non-combat fire matters because it tests training, readiness, and the ship's ability to contain emergencies while continuing missions. And that's why reporting emphasized two things at once. It was serious enough to injure sailors and controlled enough that the ship stayed operational. USNI News. Second, why do these incidents produce instant conspiracy theories? Because people confuse high value with high vulnerability. They assume that because a carrier is expensive and important, it must be constantly under attack. But in reality, the simplest explanation often wins early. Onboard incidents happen, especially on long deployments, and even the most advanced ships are still ships, subject to wear, fatigue, and human error. In fact, some reporting has described the Ford's deployment as unusually extended and physically straining on the ship's systems, with other maintenance issues surfacing over time. The Washington Post. That doesn't mean the ship is a failure. It means the ship is being pushed hard, and pushing hard creates friction. Now let's talk about the Ford specifically, because 13 billion gets thrown around like it's a punchline. The USS Gerald R. Ford is the lead ship of the Ford class, the newest generation intended to replace older carriers. The cost is often cited around that number, and the class has had well-publicized technical and reliability debates over the years. So the moment anything happens on Ford, it becomes irresistible content. Because it fits a pre-built narrative. Expensive thing breaks. But real analysis doesn't stop at a meme. Real analysis asks, what failed, where, and what are the consequences? In this case, reporting points to a specific onboard area, laundry, rather than a combat system or propulsion. And that distinction is everything for what happens next. The Washington Post. Because if you're trying to understand strategic impact, you ask, did it affect flight operations, propulsion, command and control, or the ability to generate sorties? And the reporting so far suggests the carrier remained operational after the fire was contained. The Wall Street Journal. Now here's the framework I promised, the one you can use every single time a viral military headline hits. 3 questions. 1. Is the claim describing an outcome or a mechanism? Carrier on fire is an outcome phrase. The mechanism could be onboard incident, accident, malfunction, or combat. If you don't know the mechanism, you don't know the story. 2. Is the story converging or mutating? Credible stories converge. As hours pass, multiple outlets align on the same core facts, even if details evolve. Bad stories mutate. They keep changing. Different location, different weapon, different timestamp, different sources, always more dramatic. 3. What would we expect to see if the dramatic version were true? If an aircraft carrier had been struck in combat, you'd expect a cascade of indicators, official statements about hostile action, force posture changes, escalatory responses, and a rapid information lockdown paired with very careful official language. Instead, what we saw reported was consistent with a non-combat onboard fire, localized origin, injuries treated, fire extinguished, ship operational. The Washington Post. Now, I want to address one more thing, because this is the part that's going to show up in your comments and in your group chats. People will say, okay, but why would they admit it's laundry? That sounds embarrassing. Exactly. That's one reason it's credible. Wars create incentives to hide combat vulnerability. They do not create the same incentive to invent a mundane origin for a real combat hit, because if you get caught lying about that, you lose credibility permanently. So when you hear a mundane explanation early, your instinct shouldn't be to scoff. Your instinct should be, does this explanation match how navies actually operate and report non-combat incidents? And based on the convergence of reporting, it does. The Washington Post. Now let's zoom out for a second. Why does this matter beyond the headline? Because it highlights a reality people don't like to talk about. Even in war, a lot of the risks are still non-combat. Mechanical issues, fires, fatigue, maintenance, human error. And those risks can shape operations because they affect tempo and readiness. A carrier isn't just a weapon, it's a system, and systems require maintenance windows. So when reporting mentions the Ford being on an extended deployment with systems under strain, that isn't gossip, it's operational context. The Washington Post. And that brings us to the question everyone really wants answered. Is this a sign the US is losing control? No. But it is a reminder that sustaining power projection over long periods is hard, even for the strongest military on Earth. That's not weakness, that's physics and logistics. Now let's talk about what to watch next, because the story doesn't end at fire extinguished. Here are the three most important follow-on signals. Simple, not technical. First, does the Navy provide additional details, and do those details match early reporting? If the story is real and straightforward, details tend to fill in without contradiction. Second, do we see operational impact? Changes in where the strike group positions, whether flight operations are paused, or whether another carrier is accelerated to relieve the Ford. Some reporting has discussed replacement planning and the stress of extended deployment cycles. Watch those movements because movements don't lie. The Wall Street Journal. Third, does misinformation surge with recycled footage? If you start seeing the same burning ship clip used again, or missile hit claims with no credible confirmation, that's not new evidence. It's the algorithm feeding on the moment. And we already have a track record of that pattern, with carrier fire videos being recycled and debunked. PolitiFact. Now let me land this with a clean summary, because if you can't summarize, you can't stay grounded. A fire broke out aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford in the Red Sea, reported as originating in the ship's laundry area, with 2 sailors injured and treated. The fire was contained and extinguished, and the ship remained operational, with reporting emphasizing it was not combat-related. The Washington Post. The viral version tries to turn that into carrier hit or carrier disabled because that's more clickable. But the real lesson is bigger than this one incident. In modern conflict, the information war moves faster than the physical war. So don't let the first dramatic caption program your beliefs. Track the mechanism, track convergence, track real operational signals. Now I want your take. Do you think the bigger risk in moments like this is the incident itself, or the way misinformation turns routine emergencies into instant escalation narratives? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want, I'll do a follow-up when more verified details emerge. Only confirmed updates, no hype.